You just ruined my wedding tuxedo because you weren't paying attention. Do you know how much it costs?
Everything is perfect. Then in one violent second everything stops. The groom, dressed in his tailored black tuxedo, raises his hand and slaps a young male server across the face. Hard. The sound echoes through the hall like a gunshot. Trays crash to the marble floor. Wine glasses shatter. 200 guests freeze in horror. The bride's scream cuts through the silence. But here's what nobody knew in that moment. The man he just struck wasn't just some random server trying to make rent. He was someone whose identity would tear apart everything this groom thought he knew about his new wife, his marriage, and his own character. Before we continue, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Now, you're probably wondering what could make a groom become violent at his own wedding. Why did this server look hurt in a way that went beyond the physical pain? As if that slap carried a deeper wound. And what secret was the bride hiding from everyone in that room, including the man she just married? Most importantly, why did she whisper, her voice trembling with terror? Oh no, not him, not today? None of this was random. This wedding was built on buried truths, hidden shame, and a collision course that had been set in motion years before anyone walked down that aisle. Let me take you back 6 months. Raymond Mitchell was exactly the kind of man you'd expect to throw an extravagant wedding. 32 years old, heir to his family's commercial real estate empire, educated at prestigious schools. He wore his wealth like armor, never letting anyone forget that he came from money. But beneath that polished exterior lived a man drowning in insecurity. Raymond's father had built everything from nothing, and Raymond spent every day terrified he'd never measure up. So he overcompensated. He spoke louder than necessary. He made sure everyone knew the price of his watch, his car, his suits. And he had very specific ideas about who belonged in his world and who didn't. To Raymond, life was a hierarchy, and he'd been taught from childhood that some people were simply born to serve while others were born to be served. It wasn't cruelty in his mind, just the natural order of things. Then he met Melissa Cooper, and for the first time in his life, Raymond felt something shift. Melissa was 28, a pediatric nurse at the Children's Hospital downtown. And she was nothing like the women Raymond usually dated. No designer handbags or trust funds. She drove a 10-year-old Honda and wore scrubs more often than cocktail dresses. But she had something Raymond had never experienced in his cold, transactional upbringing. Warmth. Genuine kindness. When Melissa smiled at you, you felt seen, not assessed. Raymond fell for her hard, though he'd never have admitted how desperately he needed someone to love him for who he was rather than what he had. But Melissa carried secrets that weighed on her like stones. She'd lost both parents in a car accident when she was 19, and she'd been left to raise her younger half-brother, Daniel, who was only 12 at the time. For 3 years she'd tried. Working double shifts, skipping meals to make sure he had school supplies, sitting up late helping with homework after 16-hour shifts. But the foster care system had other plans. When social services discovered she was struggling financially, they'd removed Daniel from her care, placed him with a family across the state. The separation destroyed them both. Melissa fought for 2 years to get him back, but by then Daniel had run away from his foster home. She'd searched everywhere, filed missing person reports, spent every penny she had on private investigators. Nothing. He'd vanished into the streets at 15 years old. And Melissa had spent the last decade carrying that guilt like a second heartbeat. When Raymond proposed, Melissa said yes because she loved him. But she also said yes because she was exhausted from carrying her past alone. She wanted to believe in new beginnings, in the possibility that she could build a family again. But she made a calculated decision. She never told Raymond about Daniel. She'd mentioned losing her parents, but she left out the brother, the poverty, the years of struggle. Raymond's family already barely tolerated her background. His mother had made several pointed comments about Melissa's humble origins. If they knew she came from even more hardship, if they knew she'd had a brother taken by child services, Melissa feared Raymond might see her differently, see her as less than. So she buried that part of herself and tried to become the woman Raymond's world expected. Meanwhile, 300 miles away, Daniel Cooper was trying to survive. He was now 23 years old, and the decade since he'd last seen his sister had been brutal. After running from foster care, he'd lived on the streets for 2 years. He'd worked under the table jobs, slept in shelters, gone hungry more nights than he could count. Nobody wanted to hire a teenage runaway with no address and no references. By the time he turned 18, Daniel had found semi-stable work in the service industry. Washing dishes, bussing tables, eventually waiting tables at weddings and private events through a catering company. The pay was terrible, the hours were long, and guests treated servers like furniture, but it was honest work. Daniel thought about Melissa constantly. He tried to find her over the years, searching social media with the limited internet access he could get at public libraries, but her married name was different now, her profile's private. He had no idea she'd become a nurse, had no idea she'd moved to the other side of the state. All he knew was that his sister had tried her best, and the system had torn them apart. He didn't blame her. He blamed himself for running. If you're still watching, drop a comment saying family matters, and let us know what you think about Melissa's decision to hide her past. Would you have done the same thing? 3 weeks before the wedding, Daniel's catering company got a massive contract. Some wealthy couple was throwing a reception at the Grand Meridian Hotel, 200 guests, full dinner service, premium pay for a Saturday night. Daniel signed up immediately. He needed the money desperately. The job posting didn't list the couple's names, just the event details and the dress code. Daniel showed up the day of the wedding at 2 in the afternoon for setup. He put on his crisp white server's jacket, polished his shoes, and tied his black bow tie. He'd learned long ago to make himself presentable, to smile politely, to never make eye contact long enough to make guests uncomfortable. Servers were meant to be invisible. Around 6 p.m., the guests started arriving. Daniel was assigned to the main dining room, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, refilling water glasses, clearing plates. He moved through the crowd like a ghost, efficient and forgettable. Then he saw her. Melissa, his sister, sitting at the head table in a white wedding gown. Her hair was styled in an elegant updo, her makeup perfect, her smile radiant as she laughed at something the man beside her said. Daniel's knees almost buckled. His heart stopped. The tray in his hands trembled so badly he had to set it down before he dropped it. Melissa. After 10 years of searching, 10 years of wondering if she was alive, if she was happy, if she ever thought about him. Here she was, getting married. To a man Daniel didn't recognize. Living a life Daniel knew nothing about. He stood there frozen behind a decorative pillar, watching her from across the room. She looked so different. The Melissa he remembered wore jeans with holes in the knees, and worked herself to exhaustion. This Melissa looked like she belonged in this world of crystal chandeliers and designer gowns. Daniel wanted to run to her. Wanted to shout her name. But shame held him in place. Look at her. Look at him. She'd built something beautiful while he'd been washing dishes and sleeping on couches. What would he even say? He felt sick. He'd come here to make $100 serving dinner. And instead he'd stumbled into the life his sister had built without him. The life where he clearly didn't fit. Don't forget to hit that like button if this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat. And stick around because what happens next will leave you speechless. Daniel decided he'd finish his shift and leave quietly. He wouldn't approach Melissa. Wouldn't ruin her perfect day with the reminder of everything she'd left behind. He'd serve the meal, collect his pay, and disappear back into the anonymous life he'd built. He'd let her have this. She deserved happiness. The dinner service went smoothly at first. Daniel kept his head down, moving between tables with practiced efficiency. He was carrying a tray of entrees toward the head table when it happened. The groom, Raymond, was standing near his chair talking to some guests, gesturing with his wine glass. He wasn't paying attention to his surroundings. Daniel approached from the side, focused on delivering plates. Neither man saw the other. Raymond turned suddenly, his elbow knocking into Daniel's shoulder. The tray tilted. Not much, Daniel caught it immediately, but a small splash of red wine from Raymond's glass landed on Raymond's sleeve. A few drops. Nothing major. But Raymond's face changed instantly. That casual expression transformed into something cold and furious. He looked down at his sleeve, looked up at Daniel, and in that moment, Daniel saw something that made his stomach turn. Contempt. Pure, are you serious right now? Raymond's voice was loud enough that nearby conversations stopped. People turned to look. Do you have any idea how much this tuxedo costs? Daniel's throat went dry. Sir, I'm so sorry. It was an accident. An accident. Raymond stepped closer. You just ruined my wedding tuxedo because you weren't paying attention. Do you understand what today is? The room was going quiet now. Daniel could feel 200 pairs of eyes on him. I'm very sorry, sir. If you'll allow me, you can what? Pay for it. With what? Your tip money. This jacket costs more than you make in 6 months. Daniel felt his face burning. The shame was overwhelming. I understand you're upset. Please let me get something to. Raymond didn't let him finish. In a moment of rage fueled by alcohol, embarrassment, and years of being taught that people like Daniel didn't matter, Raymond raised his hand and slapped Daniel across the face. Hard. The sound cracked through the ballroom like thunder. Daniel's head snapped to the side. The tray clattered to the floor. Plates shattered. Silence fell like a curtain. Daniel stood there, his cheek already reddening, his eyes stinging not from pain but from humiliation. And then Melissa screamed. Not a scream of surprise. A scream of recognition. Of horror. Daniel. She was on her feet, her chair falling backward. Daniel, oh my God. She was running across the dance floor in her wedding dress, heels clicking on marble, veil streaming behind her. The entire room watched in confusion as the bride ran toward the server, who'd just been assaulted by her groom. Melissa grabbed Daniel's arm, tears already streaming down her face. Daniel? Is it really you? Where have you been? I've been looking for you for 10 years. Daniel couldn't speak. He was staring at his sister, at the tears running through her makeup, at the desperate hope in her eyes. Melissa turned to the stunned crowd, her voice breaking. This is my brother. This is Daniel. My little brother. Leave a comment right now telling us, would you forgive Raymond if you were Daniel? We want to know what you think. The silence that followed was deafening. Raymond stood frozen, his hands still tingling from the slap, his brain trying to process what his wife had just said. Brother? This server was her brother? Melissa hadn't mentioned having a brother. Ever. Melissa wasn't listening to anyone but Daniel. Where have you been? I filed missing person reports. I hired investigators. I thought you were dead. Her voice broke. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't keep you. I tried so hard. Daniel's eyes were wet now too. I know you did. It wasn't your fault. None of it was your fault. Raymond finally found his voice. Wait. Stop. You have a brother? You never told me you had a brother. Melissa turned to him, still holding Daniel's arm like she was afraid he'd disappear. I was going to tell you. I was scared. Your family already barely accepted me, and I didn't know how to explain that I had a brother who ended up in foster care, who I couldn't take care of. Raymond felt like the floor was tilting. His wife had kept this enormous secret from him. This young man he'd just struck in front of 200 people was family. His brother-in-law. The shame hit him like a physical weight. But deeper than shame was something worse. The realization of what he'd just done. What he'd just revealed about himself. He'd slapped someone for spilling wine on his jacket. He'd treated another human being like garbage because he considered himself superior. And the person he'd humiliated, assaulted, tried to destroy in front of a crowd, was his wife's brother. The brother she'd spent a decade searching for. The brother she'd lost and clearly never stopped loving. Raymond looked at his hand, still red from the impact. Then he looked at Daniel's face, at the mark already forming. Then he looked at the 200 guests staring at him with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Raymond's voice came out hoarse. I didn't know. Would it have mattered? Daniel's voice was quiet but steady. If I wasn't her brother, if I was just some random server, would it have mattered then? The question hung in the air. Raymond opened his mouth, closed it. He had no good answer. Because the truth was, no, it probably wouldn't have mattered. He'd treated service staff poorly his entire life. Snapping at waiters, being rude to housekeepers, leaving terrible tips. He'd considered it normal. But seeing the pain in Melissa's eyes, Seeing the way she held onto her brother like he was made of glass, Raymond suddenly saw himself through their eyes. And he hated what he saw. "You're right," Raymond said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It shouldn't have mattered. But I made it matter. I've been making it matter my whole life." Raymond walked slowly toward Daniel. Several guests tensed. Instead, Raymond did something he'd never done in his adult life. He removed his tuxedo jacket, the expensive one with the wine stain, and he knelt down on the marble floor in front of Daniel. The gasp that went through the room was audible. Raymond Mitchell, kneeling in front of a server. "Daniel," Raymond said, looking up at this young man he'd just met under the worst possible circumstances. "I'm sorry. Not because you're Melissa's brother, though God knows that makes this worse. I'm sorry because what I did was wrong. I treated you like you were nothing. Like you didn't matter. And that's on me. My father taught me that some people are better than others. That money and status make you superior. I believed him. I lived that way. But he was wrong. And I was wrong. And I'm sorry." Daniel stood there, looking down at this man who'd slapped him minutes ago and was now kneeling at his feet. Part of him wanted to walk away. Part of him wanted to let Raymond suffer in his shame. But Daniel had spent 10 years surviving. And survival had taught him something important. Carrying anger was exhausting. Holding grudges was a luxury he couldn't afford. And watching his sister's face, seeing how torn she was between the man she'd married and the brother she'd lost, Daniel made a decision. Subscribe if you want more stories that make you think differently about the world. Trust us, you won't regret it. "Raymond," Daniel said quietly, "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it. Maybe you don't. But because I don't want to spend the rest of my life carrying what you did to me. I've carried enough." He looked at Melissa. "And because my sister loves you. I can see it. And after 10 years of being apart, I'm not going to let my first day back in her life be the day I destroy her marriage." He reached down and offered Raymond his hand. "Get up." Raymond took Daniel's hand, and Daniel pulled him to his feet. The two men stood facing each other, separated by everything and connected by nothing except the woman they both loved. Melissa moved between them, taking both their hands. Her wedding makeup was ruined, mascara running down her cheeks, but she was smiling through tears. "Daniel, this is Raymond. My husband." She turned to Raymond. "Raymond, this is Daniel. My brother." The formal introduction in the middle of the chaos was almost absurd. But it was also necessary. A reset. A starting point. The rest of the reception was unlike any wedding celebration in history. The formal dinner service was abandoned. Daniel changed out of his server's uniform and sat at the head table between Melissa and Raymond. Guests came up throughout the night to hear the story, to offer congratulations on the reunion. Melissa's nurse friends surrounded him like a protective circle, making sure he had food, asking if he was okay. Raymond spent the evening in quiet reflection, watching his wife and her brother talk and laugh and cry as they tried to fill in 10 years' worth of missing pieces. He saw the way Melissa looked at Daniel with such fierce love, the way Daniel kept touching her arm like he needed to confirm she was real. And Raymond understood something he'd never grasped before. Family wasn't about blood or status or who came from where. Family was about who showed up, who stayed, who forgave, who tried. The months that followed weren't easy. Daniel struggled with accepting help. Raymond struggled with unlearning 32 years of entitlement. Melissa struggled with balancing her marriage and her rekindled relationship with her brother, while dealing with the guilt of having kept him secret. But they worked at it. Raymond used his connections to get Daniel enrolled in community college. Daniel moved into the guest house on Raymond and Melissa's property. They had weekly dinners together. Sometimes they fought. Sometimes old wounds resurfaced. But they kept showing up. So what can we learn from this? The way you treat people when you have power over them reveals who you really are. Raymond's reflexive cruelty toward Daniel wasn't an aberration. It was the natural result of a lifetime of believing that some people matter less than others. But people can change. Raymond could have doubled down, could have defended his actions. Instead, when confronted with the ugliness of his own behavior, he chose to acknowledge it, own it, and work to be different. That's courage. Daniel's forgiveness wasn't weakness. It was strength. It takes no strength to hold a grudge. But forgiveness? Forgiveness requires you to let go of the narrative where you're always the wrong party. It requires you to see the person who hurt you as complex, flawed, capable of change. Daniel chose forgiveness not because Raymond earned it, but because carrying that anger would have poisoned the reunion with his sister. Here's the question for you. Watching this right now, how do you treat people who can do nothing for you? How do you talk to waiters, servers, cashiers, janitors, delivery drivers? Are you patient with them? Do you see them as people with their own struggles and stories? Or do you see them as inconveniences? Because how you treat people when you don't have to be kind reveals everything about your character. Raymond learned this lesson in the most public, humiliating way possible. But he learned it. And that's what matters. You don't have to wait for a catastrophic moment to examine how you treat others. Before we end, we want to hear from you. If you were at that wedding and saw what Raymond did, what would you have said to him? If you were Melissa, would you have hidden your brother's existence? If you were Daniel, could you have forgiven so quickly? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. Stories like this remind us that behind every person serving you coffee or cleaning your hotel room, there's a complete human being with a story you know nothing about. They might be someone's beloved brother, someone's devoted mother, someone's lost child trying to find their way home. Treat them accordingly. If this story moved you, share it. Tag someone who needs to hear this. And subscribe because we're committed to bringing you stories that don't just entertain but transform. Stories that make you uncomfortable in the best way. Stories that hold up a mirror and ask, who are you when nobody's watching? Thank you for watching. Thank you for being part of this community. And remember, the slap that changed everything didn't just change Raymond and Daniel and Melissa. It can change you too, if you let it. See you in the next video.